fits kind of like a, like a traditional ski hat, like a vintage ski hat, I guess I should say. Kind of a little loose, floppy with its pom-pom. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. This is a podcast primarily about knitting, though I do get up to other fiber-related topics from time to time, and I do plan on sharing those with you here, along with some other musings that I have in terms of owning a fiber business and running all of that from home with 2 little kids and a husband who is teaching high school from home currently. I am coming to you from Henderson, Nevada, which is where I am from and where I live, with my husband, Brandon, our 2 little boys, Ronan and Angus. Angus just started kindergarten this year, and Ronan is turning 3 in March. This is episode 42 of the podcast. It has been 9 months since the last episode of the podcast, and a lot has changed in that 9 months for all of us because of the situation that we find ourselves in globally with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also specifically for my family in this case. We made some really big changes back in May and June. If you are familiar with the podcast or have been watching it for any length of time, you know that I am sitting in a new filming location in our new home, and I am so thrilled to be sharing it with you. It's comfortable, it's cozy, it's just perfect for this podcasting space. So welcome to my new little podcasting studio in the office of Fiber for the People Yarn. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can do so on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram under my hand-dyed yarn business, Fiber for the People. The Instagram handle is @fiber.for.the.people. That is all Fiber for the People related, as well as smidgens of my own knitting that I like to share there. That is the only place you can find me on Instagram and really on social media in general outside of Ravelry. All of those links are down below, so if you have any question or you want to figure out how to get someplace, just check in the description box down below, and all of those links are there for you. There is a Ravelry group for the Wool Needles Hands podcast. If you head over to Ravelry and go up to the groups tab, search Wool Needles Hands, you can find us there. Head over there, join the group, and then you can be involved in any of the knit-alongs that we have going on throughout the year. Speaking of knit-alongs, the only knit-along that I am going to be carrying over into 2021, and I'm anticipating this to be the only knit-along that I do this year, but we shall see. But for right now, I'm going to carry over the Wool Needles Hands Year of Knits 2020 to be the Wool Needles Hands Year of Knits 2021. I really love the concept. I'm going to carry over that knit along as exactly as it was outlined in the previous podcast episode. So I'm going to share that with you here. And actually, instead of reading all of this to you, because that would just be a waste of time right now, I just encourage you, if you want to get involved in the Wool Needles Hands Year of Knits make along, and when it's called Year of Knits because we're talking about fabric crafty stuff, you don't have to knit. You can crochet, you can weave, whatever you would like to do, but it is a year-long make-along. But just head over to the Ravelry group, and it's hard to show you here when you're doing the Ravelry app because it's just a bunch of, but you're looking for Wool Needles Hands Year of Knits make-along 2020 chatter thread. I think what I'm going to do is just edit the title of that to 2021 and make that carry over into this next year. So read about it all over there. I definitely encourage you to get involved. There will be prizes sporadically throughout the make-along. I'm not going to have a set schedule on prizes, but what I will do is that every episode of the podcast, I will feature makes that are coming out of that make-along. I'll show my little video montage that I do for all of the different makes that are coming out. Not all of them. I'll select a few that I can feasibly fit in the time frame of the podcast episode and share them with you here so that people can see what you're working on this platform. So that's it in terms of Ravelry and make-alongs and getting involved in the Wool Needles Hands community. But okay, let's go ahead and continue on with the show. What is in my really adorable black speckled mug is a cup of coffee. It's morning time. Good morning from, the Southwest United States. So I'm having some coffee. This is Mothership Coffee Roasters coffee. They're a local coffee roasters here in town that I adore. So that is what I have going on in here in my black speckled coffee mug. I love this mug. I'm gonna get a little closer so you can see it. I just picked this up at a place in town called World Market, and I really especially love that it has black speckles. If you know anything about me as a yarn enthusiast and dyer subsequently, I love a good black speckle, and this coffee mug speaks to that. So let's go ahead and get started, get right into the episode. I'm going to save the kind of the story about what got us to this new place. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the very end of the podcast. But in the meantime, let's move right in to my projects. Okay, I want to start with a few things that I have finished. I have been on quite the hat kick lately, and I have 3 hats here that I want to show you. What's really cool is that all 3 of these are original Fiber for the People designs. That means I designed them and I'm including them in the shop. So I will call these Fiber for the People designs, but we can also say that they're Taylor Earl originals. I have a lot of fun knitting hats, and also because it really taps into that instant gratification. They're a small project. You only really need to complete one thing. It's not a pair of small things, and they work up really quickly, and I just love them. So designing them is also very similar. It's very enjoyable to come up with fun designs for hats. All of these were born from my own, desire to have a hat like this, and kind of like my own hat wearing preferences. I like a hat that has a slouch. I like a hat that has a little bit of a, not roominess. I don't like hats to be baggy or overly big, but I do like it when they fit with a little bit more wiggle room and space. And so these hats are definitely flexible in terms of size. This first one here, I'm calling the welded hat. This is a free pattern available on the Fiber for the People shop currently. All of these designs that I'm about to show you are going to be or are already available in the shop for free as a free PDF download. But I designed all of these because I wanted a really nice all over ribbed hat. I wanted a really cute, unique stripy hat. I wanted to play around and come up with a color work design. So this is all entertaining and enjoyable for me, and this is not my line of work. This is a kind of a hobby, and so I like to do that, write up the pattern, and offer it to you guys to give it a shot. So they're all available, compliments of the house, in the shop. This one is, along with a few other patterns. These 2 will be soon, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But this hat is called the welded hat, and the reason I decided to name it that is because of the crown, the decreases on the crown here. That is intentional. I was playing around with decreases that would kind of, for the most part, retain that ribbed pattern all the way up the crown of the hat. And I know that there are ways to do that, but I thought that this looked really cool once I tried it, because it gave the hat this kind of pieced together look up at the top. And I thought, I'll get a little closer so you can see. I thought initially in the beginning, it kind of looked like the hat had been welded together. Like if this were a piece of metal, that the seams were almost like what it looks like when you weld, pieces of metal together. And so I thought that was kind of cool and gives it a little bit of a rustic look. And so I called it the welded hat. But other than that, it's just a very basic kind of essential knit hat with all over rib. This is knit using the Fiber for the People Merino Aran base, which is 100%, in this case, 100% superwash merino. I do have a 100% non-superwash Aran that is identical. It's just non-superwash, but this happens to be the superwash, and I love it so much. It's a beautiful yarn to knit with. It gives really great stitch definition, and in this gauge, it's so squishy and sumptuous and gorgeous. This has a nice tightly knit brim that kind of loosens up a bit as you get into the body of the hat, so it fits really nicely, both with a folded brim and without. So if you fold the brim, you get a little bit more of kind of like a watch cap style. And that's nice if you want something that doesn't come down quite so far on your head. Make sure it's focusing. So it looks like this, which is nice. But I prefer to wear it just like this. Let's toss this sucker on. Now, pro tip, I know that sometimes we knit these hats that are supposed to have slouches, which means they have to naturally be a little taller so that when you adjust them, they slouch down the back. Sometimes people will put their hats on and then they have this like cone head situation happening back here, and that can be like alarming, like maybe you did something wrong. But really what you have to do is just kind of adjust it down. Some people dig this and that's fine. But what I do, I'm going to kind of turn so you can see, is I just take it in the back and grab right here and just pull down just like that. And it pulls it down, it kind of tucks it in back here, giving you a nice little slouch. So it goes from being like conehead hat to, and I have a screen right down here so I can see all of what's going on over here, but it gives you kind of a nice little slouch in the back there. And I think that this could be really cute with a pom-pom. I just chose to keep a pom-pom off, but like a nice contrasting pom-pom or one of those like furry numbers or something could be really cute with this. So let's do a quick hair adjustment. Yeah, so that is the welded cap. Again, you can download this right now in the shop for free. If you choose to use Fiber for the People to knit this or any of the hats that I'm about to show you, definitely look into the Fiber for the People signature solids. You can find those on the shop in the shop link. There's a link for signature solids. All of those are available anytime on a dyed to order basis. It's about a 2 to 4 week turnaround time, but if you want to knit these in the colorway that you see, in the yarn that you see, that's a really great way to do that. This next one is called the Nutshell hat. It's my take on kind of a classic ski hat motif, if you will. Let's see if I can get that to, there we go. Yeah, so it's just a really cute 3-color colorwork hat, nice and chunky and rustic. I love the way colorwork comes together with Aran weight yarn. I feel like there's something about this particular yarn too, that gives it a really rustic, chunky hand knit feel. And I mean that in a good way. Not that there's a bad way for that, but it just looks luxe in its rustic hand knit quality, if that makes any sense. And this definitely has that appeal. Once you get all the color work together and get it blocked, it kind of comes together really nicely and has a nice rustic look to it. So I knit this again in the Merino Aran, the same yarn that I did in the other 2 hats here, and I'm using 3 different colors. So, oh, and I forgot to mention too, this is in the colorway Rattan, which is the same as the brown that you see here. So that is the Rattan colorway. This green is a really beautiful kind of deep pine green, forest green, called Endor. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so yeah. And then the white creamy color here is actually a colorway called Char. It's not a solid, it's a speckled colorway. It's kind of a really creamy base with some burnished and dark speckles that gives it kind of a char look, but that's what I used for that white contrast. I feel like this, because it's a 3 colorway design, there's a lot of potential for fun color patterns and schemes going on here. But what's also cool about this is that there are no rows. I take that back. There are only 2 rounds, I should say, where you're using all 3 colors in the one round. Other than that, you're only ever knitting with 2 colors, which is kind of nice because you get that cool 3 color effect, but it's not quite so laborious as having to knit the entire hat with three colors. So that's that. That's the Nutshell hat. And it this one, I don't want to say it tends to run large, but it definitely has a little bit more of a relaxed ski hat feel. So I'll try it on, show you. Okay, so yeah, it feels nice. And another thing that makes this kind of work is that this whole section of color work up here, you know, squinches in a little bit, holding things in place. The brim, because it's narrow, isn't really doing that work as much. And I don't know if I would consider that a design flaw. And because I haven't released the pattern yet, I may go back and make an adjustment to a regular brim where you can have the option to roll it. I mean, you could still do that now. You would just knit a longer brim, but I may adjust it so that this is fewer stitches than this, so that maybe it holds it in place a little bit better. So who's to say, I might include in the pattern some modifications that you could follow if you wanted to have a tighter brim or if you wanted to fold it over. You please, and this is in the case of anything that you hear here, comment down below with suggestions, let me know what you think. But this is the nutshell hat, knit in Fiber for the People merino Aarons. It fits kind of like a, like a traditional ski hat, like a vintage ski hat, I guess I should say. Kind of a little loose, floppy with its pom-pom. And I just made the pom-pom with the same yarn all held together. It reminds me of the type of hat that Kevin McAllister wears in Home Alone, because he's got the cutest hats in that movie. And this kind of gives me that Home Alone Kevin McAllister vibe. Okay, last of the hats, but not least, is what I am calling the neighborhood hat. This is just a really classic, fun, easy wearing stripy job. And I love it. So there are a few companies out there that have kind of like a custom stripe pattern that's kind of part of their branding, and this was my take on that. And I, after dyeing up several new signature solid colorways for the shop, I was putting them together and playing with different configurations, and this is the one I landed on, and I thought it was just really cool and fun. So this is knit, again, using merino Aran, and I have a thick and thin stripe pattern going on here, which I really like. I thought that was kind of a unique spin on the stripe. Instead of butting them all up together and having them all be the same thickness, I decided to make it thick and thin. And then they're also separated in this particular design by thick and thin stripes of gray. So not each of these stripes of gray in between the colors vary in their number of stitches. Or in how many rounds I went before changing back to another contrasting color. So we have thick and thin all across, and then at the very top of the hat at the crown, all the colors come together. So you can kind of see them all together, which is really cool. So anyway, I'm calling this the neighborhood hat because I knit this, and the purpose for this hat is that I wanted something that I could throw on. It went with everything. It was kind of fun to wear when you're out socially distant, socializing with your neighbors. And that's what this is. So it came together really, really quickly. I knit this in one day. Easy knitting, fun color changes. You're weaving in ends along the back, but and then this is a really great place if you're practicing that helic knitting where you make it so that the stripes kind of spiral through the hat. You could do that here. I didn't do that, so I definitely have a little bit of a jog in the back there, which is fine. But I love this. It served its purpose, and I wear it outside when we take our kids outside to ride their scooters. We live in a neighborhood now, which is so cool that we have other kids on the street that they get to socialize with. And then the parents of those children are really great people, and we get to have some nice socially distant conversation with them while the kids play. And this was that. And it's cute because it's a conversation piece, because I have gotten some compliments on it, and it's always fun to be able to say that you made something. This is a pom-pom in the colorway Tutu, which is another Fiber for the People signature solid. And I paired it here with a mohair strand as well to give it a little bit of a furry halo. And you might be able to see that halo in there. It's really cute. I'm really into this idea of contrasting pom-poms. I think that they add a little bit more visual interest. It gives it a cool handmade vibe, and yeah, I like it. So it all comes together really well. The colors that I used here are some of my newest colors. So the gray that we have is one of the pastel collection that I brought out early last year. This is in the Moon colorway. And then this is Chili, which is a nice rusty red. This is Leather, kind of a whiskey brown color. Endor, which is that pine green color that you see in that previous nutshell hat that I showed. This real light purple is called Potion. This is like a gray denim blue called Winter, and then all of those 4 colors are shown up here as well. So super fun. I love the shaping happening in this hat. You definitely have some shaping right here, and then a really nice tightly knit knit to purl to rib brim. This is kind of like my ideal hat shape. I love the shape. I love a knit to purl to brim. I just think it's kind of ideal. And the combination of needle size to yarn weight is really ideal here. And I feel like that's really easy to see when you see the fabric that it creates. So there's a nice clean transition between the ribbed brim into the body of the hat. There's a little bit of puckering that happens here, but it's ever so slight. And I actually think that that adds to the look of the hat. It gives it a little bit of a ruching look because of the shaping. And I like that. I kind of prefer that look. And also too, because the brim is knit so tightly, you don't get that weird kind of like heaviness here compared to the lightness of the fabric up here. So it's a really nice clean transition, just a really good shape for a hat. Okay, so like I mentioned, the welded hat is available now. The neighborhood hat and the nutshell hat are going to be available in the shop on January 16th at the shop update. They're going to be available in the morning. The shop update is at 4 p.m. in the afternoon Pacific Standard Time, but these will be available for download almost first thing in the morning on Saturday, January 16th. Okay, so my last finished object that I'm going to share with you now is one that I knit primarily as a way to showcase some of my yarns and also to use up some swatch leftovers that I had. So occasionally I will pull from new colorways enough yarn that I can knit a swatch, and then I relist the remaining yarn in the shop as a short skein, meaning it's a little lighter in yardage, or as a swatched cake, meaning that it was entirely caked so that I could swatch from it and then I sell the cake in the shop at a slightly discounted price. So it's just a way that I can sample the yarns to show the colorways worked up. And this is also a way to see some colorways worked together in a kind of like a color work context, I guess. So this is by Casey Herlihy. It's called the Leftover City Cowl. I knit this a couple months ago, back in November. And like I said, it was a way to kind of showcase the yarns together. I think that this particular piece is not one that I would typically wear, only because it's rather close fitting. And I feel like that, I don't know, unless we're up in the snow or something like that, where you need to tuck something under a coat that can cover your neck, like a neck gaiter. That's actually more this, in my opinion, that's what this is styled. This is definitely in the kind of like the neck gaiter type style. I'll go ahead and show you what I mean by that here. So yeah, it fits pretty close and bunches up right here. I can imagine this being perfect if you're someplace where it's super cold and you need to have it to go up over your mouth to cover this part of your face. It doesn't stay up well enough to like use it as a mask if you're going out, out in the world, but it's, it's there if you need to be extra warm. So yeah, on super cold days, I could see maybe putting this on under like a fleece or something like that to keep the neck warm. But generally speaking, I don't think it's something that I would typically wear in this climate. It gets cold here, but when I say it gets cold, like I am born and raised in the Mojave Desert. So cold to me is probably like, a springtime walk to some of you. So, it's all relative. So Casey actually has several different designs that are intended to be knit using leftovers or scraps or mini skein sets or what have you. And this is one of my favorites. What I love about this, first off, is this really cool kind of stitch pattern that she has going. It's, it kind of has like a ribbed look to it because you're going back and forth between colors, creating these stripes right here. And I really love that, how they kind of fork in and out. So you get a little of each as they shift through. So that's really, really cool. And I love the contrasting upper and lower portion as well. I think that kind of sets everything else off. And if you wanted this to be very much bold stripes, you could definitely do that with really pretty solid colors. I chose to use variegated and speckled colors here because I wanted to see if it would give it a cool, almost like faded look. And when I say fade, I use that phrase lightly because I know it's not going to fade in and out with this really pretty motif, but I wanted it to kind of have a little bit of a blending effect. So you can see that I chose to go cool colors and move up to more warm colors as I went to the top. And then I topped it and, put tops and bottoms of really rich purple, something nice and solid and rich. So the colors that I used for this are the following. The bottom and the top are the colorway Mama's Lipstick, which is a signature solid by Fiber for the People. All of these are Fiber for the People. This right here is verdigris. And then the green that you see here is actually a one-of-a-kind from a yarn club a year and a half ago. But in lieu of that, and the reason I mention this is because I offered kits for this exact color scheme in the shop, and I will be having those kits returning to the shop on January 16th. So that's the only reason why I'm mentioning this now. I'm actually using the colorway Craig Nadoon in the kits to serve as this green color that you see right here. And it actually works quite beautifully too. And then we have Prism, Moonlighter, Burnt, Harbor, and then we're back to Mama's Lipstick. So it's really beautiful. I'll go ahead and pop up some photos so you can kind of see a little closer up. I love this. I think it's a really great place to use up leftovers, scraps that you might have. And even though I say that it fits a little bit more like a net gaiter and in my opinion, less like a cowl, I think because you're just not using very much of each individual color, that you could make this wider. You could give it a larger circumference, so maybe it sits down on your neck a little bit more. I feel like you have a lot of flexibility. If you're using mini skein sets, a mini skein is typically 20 grams of yarn. This only took, for each of these colors here, this only took 10 grams of yarn for each stripe. So you could double the width of your cowl. Essentially, you probably wouldn't be able to get a full double the width, but you could definitely widen it out a little bit more and still have enough yarn to do the job. This down here for the top and the bottom, if you're using the same color, is going to take a full mini skein. But if you're pulling from your stash, you know, a half skein or something like that to do your top and the bottom, then you should be fine. So those are some things that you can plan for if you wanted it to fit a little bit wider. But ultimately, I think it's really a great design and a great piece to showcase some really beautiful yarn. I think something like this could be, I don't know, just like a luxury piece to go out in cold weather, throw it on under a coat and have it sticking out and showing pops of color. Like, how awesome is that? So that is my leftover city cowl. You will be able to get kits in this exact color motif in the shop on Saturday, January 16th. Links are down below. I love that. Definitely check out Casey Herlihy. She is also linked down below. You can find her on Instagram at Casey Knits, which, like I said, links downstairs. But definitely check out her patterns because she has lots of really great places to use up those leftovers that you might have. Okay, so let's move on to some things that aren't completely finished yet. However, this one is half finished, so that counts for something. These, I'm really excited about these. I started these about a month and a half ago, and I have one down and almost another one started. So I'll bring this little one over here. But these are the Sunday socks by Petite Knit. Now, you may be familiar with Petite Knit. She's the one who designed the no frills sweater. She has the Stockholm hat, I believe, or Stockholm sweater. She has some really great classic staple designs. Most of them use mohair, which I'm such a sucker for mohair. I think that the halo that it adds to the fabric is just so sumptuous and beautiful. As you can see, I'm a sucker for that. But these actually don't use any mohair. And I'm breaking some rules here because I am knitting this using single ply yarn. I, way back early in the podcast, I started a pair of socks. I think it was Hedgehog Fibers skinny singles, or I don't know, something like that. And I remember getting so much, not backlash, but just like, kind suggestions not to knit socks in single ply yarn. And this was not early in my knitting, but definitely early in sock knitting for me. And I was very new to singles yarn at that time. So this is back in 2017 when I first started the podcast. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why? What's the big deal? Single ply yarn is so beautiful. Why wouldn't I use it to knit socks? And, you know, I understand now that because of the single ply construction, you know, the continuity of the yarn might be lost as you wear down the sock and what have you, whatever. Well, you know, because I am the way that I am, I decided to still break that rule, and I'm knitting these using single ply yarn. However, because this sock is an Aran weight sock and the merino singles that I'm using here are fingering weight singles, I decided to double them up. So this is not pure merino single all by itself. This is actually 2 strands of the Fiber for the People merino single, which is 100% superwash merino, and they're being held together. And I feel like truly that has added a lot of structure and continuity to the fabric when it's being held double. So I'm going to get up close so you can kind of see. Number one, the sock, get an idea of what it looks like, but this one is finished. So they're just a really cool, I say this word a lot, I feel like I'm saying it a lot this episode, but staple accessory to have, kind of a basic sock. And they also fit a little bit more roomy than your regular sock, which I really appreciate because, you know, I wear shoes that require socks sometimes, but because we're not going out very often now, if I am wearing shoes out, I tend to wear moccasins a lot, or Sherpa line boots, things like that. And the socks that I use inside of my shoes definitely are not knit socks. So I wanted a sock that was not like a boot sock, but like literally a throw it on while you're sitting down by the fire watching something on TV kind of a sock, like a sweater for your feet. And that's what I was going for with this. And that's clearly what she was going for when she designed these, because that's how they fit. So this is, yeah, definitely more like a sweater for your feet. Now, if you look, you can see that it is the single ply construction here, but you can tell there's more structure to that fabric than it would be if I were knitting this just with a single strand of single ply yarn alone. And I think that, you know, by adding another ply, or excuse me, adding another strand, it's like adding another ply. So it's working up like almost like a two ply yarn. And I love that. This is the colorway Willow. It is from the Fiber for the People Values Yarn Club. It was the first of its kind in terms of my colorway collection. It's a barely there color, very nude and neutral and beautiful. And I mean, despite the fact that it is so, and I use the term nude, I feel like that just makes, I don't know, for whatever reason that makes sense. But despite the fact that it is such a nude, neutral color, it has character. And, you know, I can see here the striping of the gray and this like rosy peach that runs through it. And I'll get a little bit closer. You can kind of see those colors that come through there. I'll show you the skein in just a moment. But when I saw, when this finally came out of the pan and then I saw the pattern, the color of the sample sock in the pattern is very similar to this. I just knew they needed to be used for something like that. And I'm really happy that I did that, because the color, the fabric created from the single ply yarns held together, everything just makes them so, you just want to put them on. So I'm going to slip this on my foot. I'm going to take off my little animal slippers here. It's a little cute. How cute is that? And I'm going to put this on so you can see how they fit. All right, so let's see how I do this here. So here is my Sunday sock. I'm going to cover my face so you can see a little bit better. But yeah, the Sunday socks by Petite Knit. Really cute. Hello. It wants to focus on my face, obviously. Perfect with blue velvet pants. So love these. Definitely recommend them if you want something kind of, you know, quick. Well, I don't want to say quick to knit. Socks are never fast for me. I think it has something to do. It's like when I'm done with the first sock, I feel like I've accomplished something. So I put it down and I don't come back to the next one right away. But that's no fun because you can't just wear one sock. But they are quick. If you're, if you're really focused on getting it done, where'd my slipper go? There we are. You're going to get it done quickly. I'm just not a fast sock knitter. It's not my favorite thing to knit. These were just calling to me as something I wanted to have. So this is, like I said, Willow, a Fiber for the People Values Yarn Club colorway. So it's beautiful. It's very light, but you can see that there's grays, that there's really pale peaches happening in there. It's a little blown out here, but yeah, it's very beautiful. Fair on those like beautiful speckles. Can you see those there? Look at that. Super pretty. And this is the merino single ply. I've been doing a lot of what I like to call bumblebee knitting, or hummingbird knitting, if you will. I knit a little bit from here and I knit a little bit from over here. And then sometimes this will, catch my attention. And so it's kind of hard to be a bumblebee knitter. The struggle is real because you just never make that much progress on any one thing, for crying out loud. But don't hate the player, hate the game. And sometimes, I don't know if you're like this, comment below, but sometimes I go through enough of that, like a little bit from here and a little bit from here, that I get to this place where I'm like, enough is enough. I'm pulling out only one thing, and I'm just at least not finishing it necessarily, but devoting all of that time that I would otherwise be like going from thing to thing to get like a good chunk of that finished. And that actually is a really great segue into my next project. Okay, I'm keeping this in my big leather bucket bag here. This is one of my new favorite things because as much as I love project bags, and they're so, I mean, I can always be compelled to make a new project bag purchase because they're just so much fun and they have their place, absolutely. But sometimes, because so much of my knitting is done in one place in our home, my little corner of the world where I sit and relax and enjoy a cup of tea or wine or coffee or whatever, that's the only place I really knit. So I'm not, you know, I'm not commuting anywhere. I don't need to carry a project bag with me. I kind of just need it all to be in one place. That doesn't mean that throwing everything into a big bucket bag like this is okay, because that can lead to problems because things get tangled. As you already know, I'm wont to tangle my yarns up from time to time on accident. But still, it's nice to have everything in one place. The project I'm going to share with you right now is not in a project bag because it's just too big and I don't want to stuff it into a project bag. But other projects like my Sunday socks sit right into this giant leather bucket bag. And I like it because it's big, so you can set it on the floor and it doesn't look like there's just some random bag on the floor. And it has some structure. It kind of serves the purpose of like a basket, so it kind of adds to your decor a little bit. And then, you know, it's leather, so it has a nice feel to it, a very natural feel to it. Yeah, it's all good. I got this at Target. So I think it was like $55 at Target, which is like my new favorite place to go these days because I can browse for what I need online and go pick it up, and it's just super easy. That's a story for another day. I keep this sitting right on the floor next to my chair in the living room by the fireplace, and that's my corner. What I'm wearing and what I'm about to show you are designs by Goodnight Day. What is her name? Aha, there we are. Her name is Tara Lynn Morrison. She's a Canadian knitwear designer, and she specializes in these really beautiful, super chunky, well, not super chunky in all instances. Some of them are just chunky, but she has really beautiful chunky knit. So if you want something that is classic silhouette, that's fast knitting, taps into that instant gratification, look no further than Goodnight Day or Tara Lynn Morrison, because that's what she specializes in. So this is one of her designs. This is the Kinnikin cardigan. I knit this last year so that I could take it to Stitches West, which was last February, and it seems like it wasn't even that long ago, and everything just got turned upside down after that whole thing. And so it's crazy to think about that. But this was knit so I could take it to that. And it's a really great, easy wearing, throw over anything cardigan, knit using bulky yarn and 2 strands of mohair. This is Fiber for the People Merino Bulky and Fiber for the People Kid Mohair Silk. I used the colorways Whimsy and, Saffron in Kid Mohair Silk, and I'll pop up a picture of each of those separately so you can see them here. But I love this. It was a fast knit. Like I said, it's easy to wear, and it has some really cool design elements that I appreciate. And when I look for patterns to knit, and I don't knit a lot of garments, it's hard for me to find the time to complete them. I just don't tackle them that often. But the ones that I am drawn to aesthetically have a few different features that it's funny because the best word I can use is that I appreciate. And this one she tends to do this in most of her sweater designs, is that she creates a really nice structured collar. So the design of this sweater it's obviously not a structured piece because it's really open and slouchy and bouncy and airy. But the collar, I think, because of all of that lack of structure here, needs to hold up to the weight, to the drape. And the way that she does that here is that she doubles up the yarn. So she's doubling up the yarn and she's using a much smaller needle to get a really nice, tight collar. So I'm going to move in a little bit here so you can kind of see. But you can see here that this is a nice, tight, structured collar. And it's a heavier, real hefty fabric compared to what we have right here, but that gives it a really nice structure around the neck. And that helps because this does kind of hang with a little bit of a weight to it. It's not heavy and it doesn't like lose its shape, but there is a little bit of a weight that pulls on that collar. So it needs to hold up to that. So that's one of the design elements of this design and her others that I really appreciate. And this particular one that I'm going to show you here is no exception to that design feature. This is called the Kalauna. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's, if I were to pronounce it phonetically, that's how it would sound. I did a few modifications on this to get it where I wanted. I'm not using the yarn suggested in the pattern. I'm using Fiber for the People, Merino Bulky, paired with a single strand of Kid Mohair Silk. So this is paired with 2 strands of mohair. This is paired with just 1. When I first started knitting this, I was just using the Merino Bulky and I was using the suggested needle size. So the pattern calls for a bulky weight yarn. So I just decided to go with the bulky and use the needle size. And I didn't test, I did test for gauge as I started working. And that's actually why I made some adjustments, because I just wasn't getting the gauge, not necessarily the gauge suggested in the pattern, but even the gauge that I wanted in terms of how I wanted the fabric to wear. And so I had to go back and make some modifications. Adding the mohair was something that I did in part of that modification. And then I also adjusted the needle size. So the first iteration of this, I'll show you right here. You can see that it kind of fits a little bit closer. Now that's obviously pre-blocked. Had I blocked that, it would have opened it up a little bit, and I totally get that, but it still wouldn't have opened it up enough to get where I wanted it to be in terms of fit. So that's kind of how it looked initially, and that's using the recommended needle size along with just a single strand of Merino Bulky. I wanted it to be a little bit more airy like my Kinnikin cardigan because, number one, because the climate where I live, it never gets quite that cold where you need something that chunky, that close fitting. And this provides warmth when you need it. And honestly, it also kind of keeps you cool when you don't need that much warmth because it has a nice open, airy structure to it. I wanted the same thing with this as well. So it is your basic top-down raglan with a really nice chunky collar like I showed you in my Kinnikin. You can see that there. It's a really nice doubled up chunky collar to give structure, but the rest of the sweater is just your basic raglan. I love the look of the double raglan stitches going down the shoulders here. Gives it a really cool classic kind of sporty look to it. And then I'm really liking the drape of the fabric so far. It's really hard to show because of the cable on my needles, but it does have a nice drape to it. It kind of like drapes like pizza dough over my fist, which has become, I don't know, a standard for me in terms of what I like in drape of a fabric, especially something like this. It kind of stretches over my hand a little bit. It doesn't weigh too much down, but it stretches over and gives it a little bit of a nice drape, and this definitely is doing that. I upped my needle size on the body of this sweater, and I added a strand of mohair to bring it to the gauge that I wanted it. Instead of maintaining that bulky and upping my needle size, I felt like the mohair kind of filled in any gaps that would have been left by just increasing the needle size alone. I feel like if I had just upped the needle size to get that fabric, I would have had more of a gappy fabric because the yarn wouldn't, I think the needle size I'm using right now is a 19. This bulky weight yarn on a size 19 is definitely going to be very open, but that strand of mohair and the halo that it provides kind of fills in some of that gappiness and makes it quite ideal in my opinion. So if I put this over my hand and allow it to kind of weigh down over my hand, you can kind of see, but that mohair in there kind of does a really nice job of blurring that gap that you see in between the stitches. So I think this is going to be very pleasant to wear, very comfortable, and very kind of roomy. It's chunky, and I think that that's kind of cool. It's a fun way to combine classic and kind of edgy at the same time. Okay, so that is it in terms of projects that I'm going to be sharing with you today. I'm going to go ahead and pop this one right back into my big leather bucket bag here. I have a couple other projects going on in that bag, but I'm going to save some of those for future episodes of the podcast. Plus, I kind of like to go in and out of the projects, like I mentioned, Bumblebee style. So yeah, I'll be saving those for future episodes. But let's go ahead and move on. Okay, we have come to the end of all of the project talk, all of the knitting talk, and I just wanted to take a minute to share with you a little bit about what's been going on in my world over the last 9 months since the last time I recorded. Now, many of you follow over on Instagram at Fiber for the People, and I so appreciate that. It means more than you could possibly know. And so you may be in tune with what's going on because I'm there. That's where I share everything Fiber for the People related. That's where I share my knitting and all of that. And then in my Instagram stories, I post little things that are going on in my life. However, if you are just a podcast viewer and a Fiber for the People Presents channel subscriber, number one, thank you. But number two, this is, it's been a while. And so what's been going on is some big lifestyle changes for us. So back in April, which was actually, I think it was the last time I filmed was in April, my husband and I, with the pandemic being very fresh in terms of us being kind of at home, I did a lot of vlogging at that time. So if you go back in March and early April, there were lots of vlogs that I was uploading with the new lockdown and kind of the things that we were doing from our home. But kind of after that started to wear on a little bit and this whole lockdown thing and this social distancing and this isolation thing became very heavy for us, not being able to see my parents and just realizing just how small our house was and all of that, it started to really just hit home, pun intended, I guess. And we started to realize that we needed more space as a family. We needed room. I needed a proper office space. We needed a proper, a garage that we could actually convert into a proper dye studio. The kids needed more room. Like all of this was just starting to become very, very evident to us. When I was filming podcast episodes previously, if you remember that corner setup that I used to film in, that was actually the corner of our bedroom. So we had a relatively small bedroom and I used, and it was the same. So when I first started the podcast, even before we moved into that house, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And that corner I was podcasting in before was in front of a window in a corner of our bedroom. And so when we moved into our previous house, it was the same thing. I just used the corner of our bedroom to create this little podcast space. And it was cramped. Filming podcasts was daunting because I had to take up the entire area of our bedroom with lighting and the tripod and the microphone and the computer, all of this. It was a big ordeal. And so that was one of the things that made me realize, number one, I need a place to film the podcast, but that means I also need office space to run my business. So in the last 9 months alone, business has been very good. And I have become very appreciative. I've always appreciated having an office space. And especially now that I have one, I know what I've been missing for this whole period of time. These wide mouth bottles are great, but then I spill water all over myself. Jeez. I realized just how much I've needed it all this time. So I am sitting in my own office space. It is beautiful. I have this giant picture window here with 2 opening slides, high vaulted ceilings, a couch. It's just, I can't tell you, it's a dream come true to have this space for myself to work in, to podcast, to have it be right here, and then to be able to separate it from the other part of our house if I need to, so that I can go back to my life with my family and leave my work kind of in my office. The reason we're here is because in May, we finally decided that we were going to begin looking for a house. Long story short, we bought this house. We went through a little bit of a wait period, and then we were able to move in June, and it's just been amazing ever since. And so because of the move, transitioning into a new home, getting comfortable in this new space, I decided that I wanted to push off any kind of filming until I felt like I was firmly and squarely on my feet in this new place, in this new space. And so here we are, and we find ourselves even now in a very unusual situation. My office doubles as a classroom for my son. He started kindergarten this year, and there's a work table right over here, and he does school at this work table on the computer. And then during the day when he's in school, I have my other little one who's 2.5 that I'm with, and then I'm also doing my own work-related things. And my husband, who teaches high school school history is also home. So he is a home-based teacher now because of being, all the teachers having to work from home. Yeah, so things are crazy. I feel like I've done pretty well this year keeping up with my regular schedule. There have been setbacks because of this very unique situation, but it's working and we feel so blessed regardless, and we just love this home so much. That's essentially where we've been and what's been going on the last 9 months. We take this whole, stay-at-home thing very seriously. We do see my parents now. We're very careful about how we go about our day-to-day so that we can see my parents, because they live 15 minutes from our house and they're a very important part of my life and my children's lives. And so we take things very seriously, so we know that it's safe to see my parents. And so, yeah, but all of it is in my opinion, we are very blessed. I would like to share with you a little tour of my office space here, of my dye studio. So I'm just gonna throw together a little video for you guys, a little montage to add right here to introduce you to the new headquarters of Fiber for the People here in this new space. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. So here it is, our little welcome to the Earl household / FFTP headquarters video. Well, guys, that is all I have for today. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means so much to know that you're watching and to share all of these things in this little corner of my world with you. Until next time, episode 43 of the podcast, which will be out in 2 weeks. Happy knitting, happy crochet, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take good care, be safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!